There was a farmer who never complained. Not once. Not when the drought came and burned his crops to dust. Not when the floods came the following year and took what little remained. Not when his neighbors gathered in the village square and loudly blamed the sky, the government, the season, the gods, everything and everyone except themselves. He simply went back to work. His name was Haru, and the people in his village had long since stopped trying to understand him. The village sat in a valley between two mountains. It was a farming village, had always been a farming village, and the people there measured a man's worth in harvests. Good harvest, good man. Bad harvest, cursed man. By those standards, Haru should have been the most cursed man in the valley. In 30 years of farming, he had faced more hardship than any 3 families combined. Drought, flood, blight, a fire that took his barn the year he finally rebuilt it, a broken leg that kept him from planting during the most fertile season in a generation. And through all of it, not one complaint, not one curse at the sky, not one night spent in the tavern blaming his fortune. He simply woke up the next morning and began again. His neighbor was a man named Borin. Borin was a good farmer, a hard worker, a man who genuinely loved his family and his land. But Borin complained constantly about the rain when it came too much, about the sun when it stayed too long, about the market prices, the soil, the insects, the tools, the season. There was always something wrong, always something that should have been different, always some force beyond his control that was working against him. He was not lazy, he was not ungrateful. He was simply at war with weather, at war with circumstance, at war with everything that refused to cooperate with his plans. And the war exhausted him. One evening, after a particularly brutal hailstorm had flattened both their fields in the same afternoon, Borin found Haru sitting outside his hut, watching the ruined crops with a cup of tea in his hands. Borin was still shaking with anger. He sat down beside Haru. "How?" he said. Just that, just one word. "How?" Haru looked at him. "How what?" "How do you do it?" Borin said. "How do you sit there like that? Our crops are gone, again. Everything we worked for since spring gone in one afternoon, and you are sitting here drinking tea." Haru was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What would you like me to do instead?" Borin stared at him. "Be angry," he said. "Be upset, curse the sky, something, anything." Haru looked out at the ruined field. "The field is flat," he said. "If I curse the sky, will it stand back up?" "No," Borin said, "but at least." "At least what?" Borin couldn't finish the sentence. Haru sipped his tea. "The storm came," he said. "The storm does not care how I feel about it. The field is flat. The field does not care how I feel about it. Tomorrow I will begin again. That is all there is." Borin sat beside him in silence for a long time. Then he said quietly, almost to himself, "Doesn't it ever break you?" Haru turned and looked at him. And for the first time, Borin saw something in the old farmer's eyes that surprised him. Not emptiness, not hardness, something that looked strangely like peace. "Everything has broken me," Haru said, "many times, but I learned something a long time ago. The breaking is not the problem. What breaks you is not what harms you. It is what you do in the moment after the breaking. That is where your life is decided." Borin went home that night and thought about what Haru had said. He thought about it for days. He thought about all the energy he had spent over the years, not fixing problems, but feeling about problems. The hours of anger, the sleepless nights of worry, the long afternoons of resentment toward whether that didn't know his name. None of it had changed a single thing. Not one crop had grown because he had cursed the drought. Not one flood had retreated, because he had raged at the rain. The world had continued, indifferent and unhurried, doing exactly what it would have done regardless of his feelings about it. And he had spent 30 years fighting that indifference. And losing. Every time. He went back to Haru the following week. "Teach me," he said simply. Haru looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "I am not a teacher, I am a farmer." "Then teach me how to farm the way you do." Haru was quiet. Then he said, "Come early tomorrow, before sunrise." Borin arrived at Haru's field before the sun had cleared the mountains. Haru was already there. Already working. Not because the light was good, not because conditions were ideal. Because the work was there and he was here, and that was enough. They worked in silence for the first hour. Then Borin said, "The soil is still hard from yesterday's frost." Haru said nothing. He kept working. "It would be easier if it had thawed more," Borin said. Haru said nothing. He kept working. After a while, Borin stopped talking about the soil. He just worked. And something strange happened. The frost that had annoyed him 10 minutes ago stopped existing. Not because it had melted, because he had stopped arguing with it. They stopped at midday to eat. Simple food, bread, water, some dried vegetables. As they sat, Haru finally spoke. "You talked about the soil for the first hour," he said. "I know," Borin said. "The soil did not change because you talked about it." "I know." "But you changed," Haru said. "When you stopped talking about it, you worked better, you breathed more easily, your hands were steadier." Borin thought about that. "Is that what you do?" he asked. "You just don't think about it." "I think about the work," Haru said, "not about what stands between me and the work." "But the hardship is real," Borin said. "The frost was real, the hailstorm was real, the drought was real." "Yes," Haru said, "all of it real, and none of it changed by my opinion of it." He broke off a piece of bread. A Stoic philosopher once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." What does that mean to you? Borin thought. "It means, the storm I build in my head is worse than the storm outside." Haru nodded slowly. "The real hailstorm lasted one afternoon. The storm in your head, how long did that one last?" Borin said nothing. Because the honest answer was, it was still going. 3 seasons passed. Borin did not become Haru overnight. Complaining is a habit, and habits do not leave quietly. There were still mornings when the frost made him mutter, still evenings when a bad day made him sharp with his wife and children. But something had shifted. He began to notice the gap between what happened and how long he held on to it. A tool broke, 1 minute of frustration, then back to work. The rain came on the wrong day. He adjusted, no storm in his head. One evening, his youngest son spilled a full bucket of water he had spent the morning carrying from the well. A year ago, Borin would have lost his temper. This time, he looked at the puddle, he looked at his son's terrified face. And he said simply, "Let us go and fill it again." His son stared at him, then smiled. And Borin realized, walking back to the well with his son. That was the first time the boy had smiled when he made a mistake instead of crying. Years later, when Haru was old and rarely left his small hut, the young farmers of the village began coming to him, the way the villagers once climbed the mountain to find the monk. One young man sat with him and asked the question they all eventually asked. How do you bear it, all of it, the losses, the failures, the seasons that take everything and give nothing back? Haru looked at the young man for a long time. Then he said, "I do not bear it, I work with it. There is a difference." The young man leaned in. "What difference?" Bearing it means you believe the hardship is your enemy, Haru said. Working with it means you understand the hardship is simply the material. The material. A potter does not complain that the clay is wet, Haru said. The clay is wet. That is what clay is. The potter works with what is in front of him. He does not wish for different clay. He learns the nature of the clay he has. He looked out at the field. Your life is your clay. Whatever season you are in, drought, flood, frost, abundance, that is your material. Work with it, not against it. The Stoics called this Amor, Fati. Love of fate. Not tolerance of fate, not mere acceptance of fate. Love. The idea that everything that happens to you, the good, the difficult, the devastating, is exactly the material you need to become who you are meant to be. Marcus Aurelius wrote it this way: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The hailstorm is not in your way. The hailstorm is the way. The frost is not your enemy. The frost is your teacher. The bad season, the broken tool, the collapsed harvest, none of it is happening to you. It is happening for you, if you choose to see it that way. Haru never complained. Not because he felt no pain. Not because the losses didn't cut deeply. But because he understood something so simple, it is almost embarrassing to say out loud. What he felt about the storm would not change the storm. But what he chose to do after the storm would change everything. That is the farmer's lesson. That is the silent lesson. You cannot choose your season. You can choose what you do with it. And what you do with it is everything. Sit with that today. If this story found you in a difficult season, subscribe to The Silent Lesson. Every week, one story, one lesson. Told slowly, told clearly. For those who are still enough to hear it.